Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Secret Lair MTG Arena podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Daniel Guajardo, and I am also here with
Steve Walsh.
Steve Walsh,
Yep,
also known as Dead Beneath on MTG Arena, and I am also T1 Delver on MTG Arena. This podcast is going to be all Arena all the time. We're going to cover deck lists. We're going to cover our picks of the week. We're going to cover our favorite archetypes. We're going to run through tons of different things. And we're going to start off with a segment today called Standard Top 5.
Right. So in this segment, we're going to basically, because it's week 2, it's early standard for Crimson Vow. It's week 2, and we're going to go over what we believe are the top 5 decks for right now, just kind of starting out early format. These are the top 5 decks that we think are going to hit the hardest and do the best in early laddering. From here, we'll just dive right into it. So I'm going to go from bottom up. So I like to start with the number 5 list here on the screen, and we got vampires. So this vampires deck, early on, it wasn't really that impressive, but I think a lot of the kinks have been worked out where you're not playing the clunkier 4 and 5 drops. I think this deck has been pretty streamlined, and I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see this climb a little bit higher from like right around about the 5th to maybe the second or even third or even second best deck on the format. It's pretty low to the ground, very streamlined. It does what it needs to do pretty efficiently, and I've enjoyed it quite a bit. Between having, 12 1-drops, which we haven't had aggro decks that could do that in a while now. Between having 12 1-drops and the versatility between Infernal Grasp, Power Word Kill, and then generating card advantage via Florian, or also just like filtering through your deck with all the blood tokens, the deck's been pretty impressive.
Yep. No, I think this one will be an up-and-comer as we go through the format.
As soon as it gets boiled down, I think so too. I liked it quite a bit. Moving on from vampires, we have another kind of up-and-comer that I've seen quite a bit. It's a response to the early week 1 decks, which were mostly aggressive decks, is the blue-black control deck, featuring everybody's favorite 7-drop Kraken horror, Hullbreak horror. This is basically a traditional control deck. Draw cards, kill things, take over with 1 large late game threat. It gets a lot of advantage to like being able to use Leer and just flashing back all these removal spells. You basically 2-for-1 your opponent until you get there.
Yeah, and Memory Deluge is a great way to find a specific card or two.
Yeah, Deluge has been pretty impressive. It digs pretty deep. A lot of these control decks, such as this one and the normal feature later in the blue-red turns deck, are the only decks I could see that actually can get some kind of use out of Deluge. And granted, the blue-red decks coming up have actually shied away from it a little bit because they've got a little bit better card selection through some of their stuff. I think it's just perfect in this specific deck.
Okay.
All right. Moving from blue-black control, we have everybody's third favorite, I guess you could say. It's the middle-born child of the aggro decks.
This is still my first favorite. This is the one I'm playing every day.
Okay. Well, this is mono green aggro. I'll let you talk about it for a little bit, then.
Oh, yeah, sure. No, I love the mono green aggro deck. It comes with a lot of the perks of being the monocolor, the Faceless Haven, which is really, I think, the whole reason we're allowed to play so many monocolor decks right now with all the snow covered permanents. It gives us such a long game against control decks. And then Uvenwald Oddity coming in as kind of our replacement for what was his name? Questing Beast, yes. Being a great card there. I think that card's really powerful. And then Blizzard Brawl being our 1-drop removal spell that lets us go against the other monocolored decks. And then cards like who you slide off Blizzard Brawl? I think it's under there. The Old Growth. Yeah, Old Growth Troll. Just being so great. Old Growth Troll, I guess, and Ranger class against the more controlling decks. If they combo out on you, that is not, we don't really have anything against that, but they're great against board wipes and being able to get us reoccurring creatures.
Sure, you got an answer to combo. Just kill them before they get to you.
That's the best answer.
Yeah, I fully agree with Faithless Haven. This is basically the a pillar of the format. The vampires deck can't run it, but this deck and what'll later on be our number one pick for deck of the week, if you will, is mono white. And the reason these aggro decks are doing good is that Faceless Haven is the reason you want to stay monocolor, strictly because of how good this card is against wrath effects and how efficient of a threat it is and hard to deal with.
Yeah, and surprisingly, the vigilance is something that is great too. Being able to get in there and then still having that mana to maybe
Get in there and
cast a
then
spell
usually
after.
cast a 2-drop or something. Yeah, it's been great.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on to our number 2 and what I think eventually will be number 1 deck. But right now, this is the big bad Boogeyman in the format, which is kind of weird because it's our number 2, but this is the Is It Turns deck. The deck that just I feel like it has the most versatility because you can set these long game control games up and then just like kind of combo off with either with a mixture of Alrund's Epiphany and Galvanic Iteration taking 2 turns, or you can just start to push the game away with Hullbreaker Horror. This card is still just the biggest, baddest Boogeyman on the format. It's hard to deal with and it can't be countered.
So lately, I think I've seen. I wish I would have thought of this earlier to get the name of the card. It's the one that makes goblin tokens. Like you create 3 goblin tokens or something like that. It's
Burn down the house.
Yes, burn down the house. So I've seen. I think people using that is possibly a way to combat the Hullbreaker because they can create so many tokens. It's hard to bounce them all, and when they die, they still deal a damage. And I've seen people doubling this spell, and it's just if you get multiple bird tokens out there, multiple devil tokens, you go really wide. And it's been kind of interesting the list I've seen with this card in it. That's the only one I wanted to mention that wasn't in this exact list.
Fair enough. Earlier in the format, in standard, before we got Crimson Vow, Burn Down the House was taking place of Battle of Frost and Fire because it was a good card to copy with the Galvanic iteration. I don't know how much I feel about it now because if you want to get your Burn Down the House going to try and get around Hullbreaker Horror, you have to do it in a manner that you have to get to it before this gets to the board, which sounds easy in practice. Just it's a 7-mana combo between that and the Galvanic iteration. But in play, it's much more difficult because of cards like Divide by Zero and Jawari Disruption, where if you tap out to try and produce that combo, a counter spell here or just Divide by Zero there, and it could actually ruin your day. Where they divide by 0, you're burned down the house. You might get 1 copy off because of Galvanic iteration, but trying to beat through that with a Hullbreaker Horror is going to be really tough.
Yeah.
So lastly, and what I believe is currently the best deck on the format, but I don't think it's going to hold that seat for long, is efficient mono white aggressive creatures. Big surprise, I know. But mono white got a lot out of Crimson Vow, and it doesn't seem like it would at first, but hopeful. Let's just start from bottom up. Let's go hopeful initiate. This card is super efficient, grows really quick, and actually removing the counters has helped quite a bit. Between blowing up like random treasures, Isika's chariots, and things of that nature, it actually does the work that you need it to do. It's just a great 1-drop threat. And
it can blow up Meat Hook too, which is hard to get
it can
through.
blow up Meat Hooks. Another card they picked up that this deck picked up out of Crimson Vow, which actually I think is what pushed the deck to the number 1 slot right now, is Thalia. There's no tiptoeing around this card. It's always been, since its original printing in Dark Ascension, this card has been amazing, and there's no surprise here that it's still just probably the best 2-drop in the deck, which is saying a lot considering Luminarch Aspirant is in the deck. But Thalia it puts such attacks on that blue-red deck that they have to deal with it. Now, granted, they have Spikefield Hazard, and that costs 2, but that 1 extra mana can be the difference between them having their combo this turn and the next turn, which is all you really need with this deck, is to push as much damage as you can, as fast as you can, and try and get them dead before they can get on board.
Yep.
The disruption package with Thalia and then Redain making their non-creature spells cost 2 more. You're just splitting attacks. You can board into elite spellbinders too, which have been pretty strong, which have always been strong since their printing. And this deck just has the right tools to go quick enough. It has the guys it has enough guys to get the other aggressive decks out of the way between Brutal Cathar. It has a big late game in Adeline. It has an early game in the 12-1 drops. You can grow with Paladin class. It just has all of its angles covered.
Intrepid Adversary can just win on a turn too if you.
Yeah, you have a lot of different Anthem-like effects. Adversary, Paladin class. Not so much Adeline, but yeah, like there's just it's got all the things you want in all the right places. It's the most efficient deck. Like, yeah. I think it's the most efficient deck. It's been
interesting to see it transform. It's been interesting to see it just transform in 2 weeks though too, because this is quite a different list from the one I saw just last week. You know, that was playing a lot of the more creature removal guys. But
I mean, they've gotten low to the ground and they figured out that the game plan is just go fast, do everything you can as quick as you can, and then make them deal with it. And right now, it's neck and neck between the blue-red deck and this, in my opinion. But this one edges it out just because I think it has a more well-rounded game plan in the early game.
I agree. Well, that is our top 5 into week 2 of Crimson Vow. And if you haven't had a chance to play any of these decks, I would recommend at least picking up 1 or 2 of them because they are all fun as well. And if you're trying to rank up the ladder, right now, personally, I'm doing pretty well with mono green, but I do think white aggro is probably going to rank you up the quickest. Or you could try to, you know, maybe sneak in with vampires, as that's one of the newer builds that people aren't really
If you're
aware
trying to climb the ladder fast, I'd pick mono or aggro. If you're trying to push through that last little bit of diamond, take your time, play as it turns. I think I like those two.
Yeah, because we know anybody who else has been grinding the ladder that each level is a very different format almost. And
vastly.
Yeah, need to know what to be picking for what place you are on that ladder.
Gotta go fast.
Yeah, that is our top 5 for standard, and we're going to move on to our next segment, which is our historic spotlight. Will be this next segment, and we're going to just go over today Seleznia Combo. Walsh, what do you got about Seleznia Combo? What do you want to talk about here first?
All right, so currently with the way Historic is played out, I would say that this is not necessarily the best deck. It's certainly one of the, if you wanted a tier ranking system, this is one of the S tier decks. This is Seleznia Combo. It is highly efficient and very strong, and it does one thing, but it does it really well. So if you've never seen the deck before, let me explain it to you. So your deck is based around gaining a bunch of life between Lunar Arc Veteran, Soul Warden, and Prosperous Innkeeper. Anytime you have a guy coming into play, gain 1 life. Seems like it wouldn't be much, right? Well, here's the payoffs. Voice of the Blessed, anytime you gain a life, put a counter on it. When it gets 4 counters, Flying Vigilance. When it has 10, it's basically an unstoppable train. The other payoff is, I mean, obviously, Heliod. Gain a life, buff your guys. Just indestructible threat just also pumps in more life gain. So that all kind of combines together, all that life gain via Lunar Arc and these, into this little guy right here. Now, this is a card that they introduced through Jumpstart, and Scurry Oak has been pretty impressive in the sense that, like, there's an infinite combo here. So if you have a Soul Warden, a Veteran, or a Prosperous Innkeeper in play, and then you have a Heliod, what it does is Scurry Oak triggers whenever a counter gets put on it. So a creature comes into play, you gain a life. Whenever you gain a life, you use Heliod to put a counter on Scurry Oak. Whenever Scurry Oak gets a counter, it creates a squirrel, which in turn makes you gain 1 life because of Soul Warden. So you make that big circle, right? Yep. So then Scurry Oak just gets infinitely huge, just the biggest. Between Scurry Oak growing and also I'm gonna trip over this name. Trelasaro, the Moon Dancer, also growing and gaining your life. These 2 things are they're giant trucks that hit you really quick, and they can hit you out of nowhere. To kind of tie the whole room together, you get Skyclave Apparition to deal with any problem permanents you're going to have, and then Collected Company just dig you through your deck and find the pieces that you need when you need them. This is the deck that you can basically win out of nowhere with it, just because of the instant speed of Collected Company. But this is one of the top decks as far as Historic goes, and I've seen it in action. It's pretty efficient and fast.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And Collected Company is just one of those cards that you can be behind in the game and it just brings you right back in.
Well, like the big thing with the deck is that it has a lot of overlap between. You have 12 cards that basically do the exact same thing between Veteran, Lunar Veteran, Soul Warden, and Prosperous and Creeper. And you have 12 cards that do the same thing between Voice of the Blessed, Talasara, and Scurry Oak. And then you just have cleanup, like Heliod is your combo piece, but it's also just an indestructible threat that also gains you life and goes your team. Like everything is super efficient and it all kind of blends together.
Yeah, it's built to do one thing and it will do it well with that many.
Yeah, the deck is strong and it does that thing.
Yeah. No, I really like it. I haven't got to play this one myself, but I look forward to giving it a shot after this podcast, though, because this looks pretty sweet, and I've always been a fan of Coco.
I've played with it a handful of times, and if you're climbing a historic ladder, you better be prepared to play against it because you will definitely be running into it.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. Sometimes if we don't want to play that list, we still need to know how to play against it.
Yep.
Oh, well, that's the historic spotlight for this week. And we're going to move on into our third segment of the show, and that is Historic Brawl. And we're going to go over our deck of the week. So for our Historic Brawl deck of the week, we'll be going over Winota Brawl.
All right, so Winota Brawl is what I would refer to as the boogeyman of the Brawl format as it currently stands. There's a lot of different powerful Brawl decks and a lot of ways you can take it, but this is we'll call it the sweatiest version of Brawl. If you want to come out hard and try and close the game fast and just climb the Brawl ladder, if you will, this is the deck to start with. Like, if you're going to play Brawl, this is going to be the first deck that you'll probably run into a few times in the ladder. Sorry about that. What we're running into is a basic Winota combo deck. Because it's Brawl, you always have access to Winota on turn 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your early drops between your 1-drops of like Alcid Life's Bounty, Asamaru, and whatnot, they all play into you hitting your later game threats, the humans, mainly like Angrath's Marauder, this one right here.
Yeah.
Or Blade Historian.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you're basically just a Boros style aggro deck where you're always going to be able to cast Winota on 4. And the big thing is that, like, just having those early drops to flip into one of these many scary late game threats like Angrath's Marauder, Lena, a Blade Historian, they'll get you.
Yeah.
It's basically just a low to the ground, super consistent, attack you out of left field if it were a deck.
So for any listeners that maybe not, or maybe haven't played Brawl all that much, if you're like me, I thought it was going to be a lot like older formats with 100 card, EDH, Commander, stuff like that, and realized kind of quickly that it is not like, hey, friendly, fun, casual gameplay. It's named aptly as it's Brawl and just try to kill your opponent with a different style of deck than any other format, being, the singleton kind of style.
The closest variant to like live Magic that this compares to is like the CDH group, I guess is what it would be.
Mm-hmm.
These decks have less, the Brawl decks have less of a group hug type aspect where you're trying to make the game go along, develop a social thing. This is more of a, hey, look, we're going to go heads up. And yeah, it's heads up, but it's definitely more of a competitive edge to it. I actually enjoy it, being that I come from a more competitive base. Yeah. I enjoy the heads up form of these style of decks. That's not to say that I don't enjoy a good game of Commander, because that format is definitely just propping up MTG as a whole. But that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, I prefer CEDH. That's actually, so I built what I thought was a Commander deck, and then was told quite quickly by a very veteran Commander player that I built a CEDH deck. So then I said, okay, who plays that? And then found some people that do. So I've really enjoyed CEDH. The politics of Commander are what I don't really care for, but if you're gonna sit around and really honestly just want to have a good time with your friends and talk, then yeah, that's probably the format
Commander,
you want.
not close, yeah.
Yeah, but CEDH and Brawl, they're pretty sweet. So I would definitely recommend one of
Historic
those two.
Brawl, Arena's gotten a big enough card pool that you can do basically anything you want, and there's a lot of stuff to do. Well, like going over all these decks every week, we're gonna see a bunch of varied spotlights and a bunch of things to do.
Yeah.
But for this week, I figured we'd start at the top and start with the sweatiest boogeyman in the room, the Winota.
Yeah. This is if you're just trying to win. This is the deck you want to hop on.
This is if you want to hit the brawl format running, go with Winota.
And we'll go over other decks that are more fun. Maybe we'll try to cover some bases for people who don't just have unlimited cards to craft either, because I know I've been playing the same as Steve here since the beta, and we have massive amounts of cards to craft in collections, but we do want to consider any listeners who maybe just started playing Arena last month. Maybe they started playing a year ago. I know it can take a while to build up that collection, so we'll try to cover some less expensive, I guess you could say, decks for the brawl format too.
We'll definitely sit down and come up with some stipulations, whereas all right, we're only allowed to have X amount of rares or X amount of mythics, and we'll go from there and see what we can come up with. If you guys want that, just let us know.
Yeah, please comment below if there's anything specific you want to see, or if there's a specific I guess, do we call them?
Let us know what your brawl commander is, and we'll definitely take a spotlight to it and take a look at it and see how much we enjoy it and what we could maybe do to improve it or not.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I think that's a good idea. So hopefully we'll get some feedback there, and we can start moving forward with this segment in that way and get that community feel. So I think that's enough for this this brawl deck, though. People probably understand it's just, kill, but so let's move on to our next segment.
Go faster, must go faster.
Yeah. Our next segment is going to be where we cover the midweek magic I guess option on Arena, where they're changing it every week to some different kind of format. So let's hop into that and discuss what they have going on this week. So this week's midweek magic format is Artisan, and Artisan, you are supposed to bring a 60 card standard deck, but using only commons and uncommons, and then basic lands, of course. So without rares, they say the common folk can truly be heard. Walsh, you want to go over what we have here for Artisan this week?
Yeah, sure. This is a deck that I came up with for Artisan this week. I was trying to find something that I enjoyed, and I thought, hey, there are already 3 lords in Narfi, Death Priest, and Blade Searcher's Cop for zombies, and we got new toys to play with, i.e. Fellswinger, Archghoul of Thraben, Wretched Throng, and Cobble Lancer, all out of Vow. This deck felt like it had finally bridged the gap to be able to play this in Artisan. Basically, what you're looking at is a zombie tribal deck, but you have a lot of reach with Eaten Alive, and you have a lot of beatdown with all of these zombie lords. You got a lot of your card advantage via Fellstinger because zombie scorpion, why not? Your mana is actually pretty close to perfect as far as what you would need for this format. I played this and quickly rattled off my 3 wins. You can generate a lot of card advantage via just eating a lot of killing the guys and not actually losing anything from Shambling Ghast, and just your guys get too big to handle. You draw cards through Archghoul. It just all kind of works together. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Death Priest was always a house in limited, so I can only imagine with all this support how great that was. Yeah. No, I really like this. Who would have thought 3 uncommon lords?
Basically, this is the uncommons deck.
Yeah, it's nuts.
4, 8, wow. 12, 16, 22 uncommons, 16 commons.
All right, yeah, no, this one looks fun. I haven't played my midweek magic stuff yet to get my prizes, but I think I will play this.
Man, it's worth it. Yeah.
Okay, so we have one more quick segment here for you folks, and we're going to hop into that here. We will be going over the limited archetype that we feel is a good one to discuss this week. So our last segment here on the show today is our limited archetype segment. So I'm going to let Walsh take this one over again too, because this was his draft.
All right, so I drafted if you're going to draft Innistrad, you might as well be drafting the vampires out of the vampire set, which I honestly believe is also probably the best archetype to draft initially. The old black-red vampires deck. It's a pretty straightforward deck in the sense of, I mean, you just have low to the ground efficient creatures and a ton of removal.
Yeah.
Between all of the blood token synergies, from Blood Fountain to Sanguine Statuette, Blood Tithe Harvester, Blood Hypnotist. Noticing a theme here. See the word blood, it's on that card. Blood Crystal Slight, Wedding Security. You're basically burning through a lot of your deck, and you get to use these blood tokens to your advantage, either by not really running out of anything to do, but you can filter through with them. But you also have cards like Harvester, which are paying you off by just using it as a removal spell. Yeah. And then you also have Hypnotist to get things out of the way. These black-red decks, while they can grind, they usually just play more of a tempo game where you're just moving things out of the way and getting through with the smaller guys until you can finish the late game via usually like a Magma Pumpler or a Growing Wedding Security, or basically even the meta stuff of Falkenrath Celebrants. This is the deck that I suggest if you're going to start drafting. I would start looking in at the black and red cards more than the other ones. It's not to say you have to hard cut black and red, because limited is a whole other monster, and this one is pretty balanced. Some of the bombs are there aren't unbeatable cards, but the bombs do kind of define the draft a little bit. Now, this deck doesn't really have any bombs. It's just a pretty efficient black-red vampires list.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone has already dubbed this archetype, but can we please call it the Red Wedding?
I mean, I don't know if George Martin's going to sue us or not, but we can certainly fire it off until he gives us a phone call. So, Red Wedding, as it were.
I do really like this archetype, though, and I agree with a lot of the points you're making there. The bombs do control a lot of this format, I think. And I think there are just so many creature bombs, which is kind of the bomb you want in a draft for the red-black archetype. But follow all your same drafting rules. You know, don't just, like you were saying, try to cut straight into red-black. If you stick to your drafting rules and you can get in red-black, get in red-black. If you can't, make sure you pivot, because drafting gets coins get more drafts, and the more free drafts we can all do, the more fun we'll all have.
Yeah. The best way to build up your collection on Arena is to play limited.
Yeah.
There is no tiptoeing around that. You can, if you're a whale and you want to drop a bunch of money, go nuts, live your dream. But if you're trying to build up your collection, limited. I cannot suggest or recommend it enough. Limited is the way to go to build your collection. So you can have those big piles of wild cards for whenever something comes out, like Jumpstart or something like that, where you can just craft what you want out of those sets and move on.
Yeah, or they just decide to, like, hey, we're going to throw in an old set to Arena for no reason, because it'll be fun. And everybody loves that. Don't get me wrong. I love that.
I've really got my sights on Eldritch Moon Remastered. They haven't announced it yet, but they like to just drop sets like that on us, so I'm kind of waiting for that one.
Yeah, and if they don't, they miss a huge opportunity with having these back-to-back Innistrad sets that, you know, it's the perfect time.
I think it's coming. Now, this is rampant speculation on my part alone, but I definitely think that, like, Innistrad Remastered is coming, and then I have my hearts set on them adding cards from other Innistrad sets, mostly just Lingering Souls. I really want Lingering Souls and Collector Brutality to enter the format, but that's another historic format.
Collector Brutality, oh.
Man, looking forward to it. So, back to the short of the limited, this is the deck that I would start with. I like we said, I think black and red in those two colors are probably the deepest in VOW draft. You get a lot of good commons and uncommons. This deck happens to have a lot more uncommons than generally you would see out of these decks, via like Blood Tithe Harvester, Rending Flame, Parasitic Grasp. But besides that, I think you have the most play in the black red, and I think that if you're going to start drafting VOW, this is where I would start.
Yeah, a good point to make really quick, though. When we discuss draft, we talk about the premier draft. That's the draft that we prefer to do ourselves, as we've been playing for a long time. And I think it's even the best kind of draft for somebody who really wants to learn how to draft. Obviously, sitting down at the table is probably your best bet. But if you're trying to learn how to draft through Arena, do the premier drafts. Drafting against a computer is only going to teach you kind of bad habits that you'll have to learn to break then later. And
So I personally feel like the premier drafts are where the majority of the arena players are drafting, and the best of three is, in my personal opinion, because I really love limited, best of three is the best draft format from a competition standpoint, where the people that are playing in best of three are generally very good. So you're definitely playing against better players in best of three than you are in the best of one queues. That being said, the best of one queues are way more convenient, and I think just overall, I think they're better for the format.
yeah, I could agree to that.
Yep.
So like we discussed just a little bit when we were in our historic brawl segment, limited is another format that people tend to have lots of questions about, especially newer arena players. Um, like, how do I build up my collection? How should I be drafting? Should I be doing the premier draft? Should I be doing sealed when a new set drops? Leave those questions in the comments if you can't find the answers or no one else is giving you the information you want, and we will be happy to pull those comments up and discuss them and walk through them individually and try to answer everything best we can. But besides that, I think that is going to wrap up the first episode of the Secret Lair MTG Arena podcast. Walsh, it has been great talking to you and running through these. Do you have anything else you'd like to add here before we say goodbye?
No, it's just I'm glad that I can be on the cast and talk to you folks at home.
Yeah. All right. So please, if you are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe, share all those good stuff. Follow us on Instagram or Twitter, where we will be posting new episodes that will be up and coming, and just probably some random magic stuff, some fun stuff sometimes too as well. And then if you were listening to our audio version of this podcast, please remember to like and subscribe to the audio version. We can be found anywhere podcasts are found, and we will talk to you all next week.